Alrighty. Everybody coming in. Everybody sit down. Take a deep breath. It's gonna be all good. Hey, Marvin. Once again, the same housekeeping about the CCR is gonna be marking is taking a little longer time just because I'm very occupied right now until the Friday, but I'll get to it and I'll make sure that you have the feedback, mark and feedback before CCR 3 for sure, which is going to be about chapter 7 or 8. So the things that we're working on. So choose, which one you want to read. You can read both if you want to, but you have a choice, right? And we have next week 2 guest lecturers coming in, like I said, so they're going to be the only lecturers, but I'm excited. An in-person guest lecturer. This is actually my first in-person guest lecturer after the pandemic, so I'm very excited. And tonight, if you want to talk about therapeutic recreation a little more, there's a webinar I'm doing from 6 to 7:30, I guess, and that counts as a credit if you're a therapist, I guess. But the details are on e-class at the top, so if you want it should be free for UR-based students. If you want to listen to me twice a day, that's something. Anyway, so today we're going to keep going and finish actually chapter 7, especially the attitude part we were talking about. And this is just a quick recap of the theory we're talking about. It's very important. Theory of planned behavior, TPB. This theory helps us to predict people's behavior, volitional behavior we want to do, we choose. That's predicted by intention, how we intend, how we schedule, how we even plan in our mind with a specific context and whatnot, which is then predicted by 3 things: attitude, subjective norm, perceived behavior control. Let's go quickly what each dimension is from the top. Attitude had an affective and instrumental aspect. What do we remember about that? Affective dimension. What does affective dimension of attitude means? How does it look like? Seriously. How do you feel about the behavior? How you think certain behavior is pleasant or not present, right? Let's say exercise. How pleasant do you think it is, right? Over the past couple exercise sessions, you feel like, oh, actually, I like the feelings of muscle soreness and whatnot. You get to that sometimes, right? Yeah, there you go. What about the instrumental aspect of attitude? I heard somewhere. How you think about it, how you think about yes, how you think about how, what kind of how are we talking about? Let's dig in a little more. It's true though, Krista is right. Is it a good idea? It's beneficial, it's useful for us, or not useful? Is exercise useful for us? Actually, there are quite a few people in the world who think not necessarily. Yeah, go out the world. I mean, and of course, we have to talk about what kind of exercise for whom, obviously. But so that's attitude. Subjective norm, there are 2 aspects. One is injunctive. The other one is descriptive. What is injunctive? This is what we love to do. It's something what other people say us to do, tell us to do, right? We love to do that sometimes. Hey, why don't you do, well, why don't you, you shouldn't do probably. And descriptive is what people actually do, yes. The people around you, right? Maybe your friends, your partner, your family member will actually do, because that indicates, their approval as well, what they do, and we role model them to an extent. And then finally, PBC, perceived behavior control, capability is about perceived skill. Okay, how difficult certain behavior is in relation to your perceived skill, how good you think you are, and controllability is how you think, how controllable you think it is. that certain behavior is obviously more controllable because, well, which one is good? You know, doing rock climbing at the wall climbing center today, it's pretty controllable for you, right? If you get your, you know, put your mind set to it and you do it, you can do it. But if you want to go to like somewhere outside the city and actually with the rock, then the temperature, the weather, you know, many other things can be quite uncontrollable as well. So that's TPB. And there are a few discussion points and debates points around that too. So I wanted to go through quickly. The one being which predictor is most powerful, except the intention. So intention is right there. But of those three things on the left side, which one is most important? Research seems to be suggesting that actually attitude is quite important, although some research suggests that subjective norm can be quite powerful. Sorry, not social norm, subjective norm can be quite powerful in some culture, especially collectivistic cultures. And also actually people in a lower socioeconomic status as well. So they tend to be more collectivistic too. So the group thinking matters more. Is that all? Is the second question. Are those four things are the only predictor of behavior? Well, TPB literature recognized that actually this one is the biggie, except the model, except the variable in the model. And probably it makes sense. Past experience of that behavior. So if you've ever been to the gym at the U of A, you're more likely to go back to it, whether you liked it or not. It's just the human nature. It's one of the past experiences considered to be one of the best actually predictors of human behaviors as well. Anyway, now TPB may be suitable considering that for more new, novel behavior and behavior choices. Then now you have to choose something totally new that you have never done. You have to pick, I don't know, would you watch your anime tonight if you never watch it? Well, that's affected by, if that's new to you, maybe TPB is a good model. But if you watched anime so many times in your life, then probably not so much TPB model. The third point is how useful this model and this theory is predicting actual human behavior. Now, there are many studies around park visiting, sports, exercise, tourism, whatnot, with this model. And research seems to be around about 30 to 40% of behavior, especially behavior choice, do or don't do. Right? It's pretty simple sometimes, it's binary. A certain behavior can be predicted by this model and all the variables in it. And in some cases, it went up to over 60%. Asians and drivers study was outdoor recreation, I think different kind of hiking and fishing and whatnot, those things. But these studies, some of these studies actually measured people's behavior. Okay, did you actually do the fishing? And then they also, before that, they tracked their attitudes, subjective norms, perceived behavior control. They also tracked their intention before actually they did it. And after the fact, or after the behavior, they came back to those people and asked, did you actually do it or not? And how effective this model is. So 30%, even going up to like over 60%. It's a pretty good model actually. So if you flip that, right, if you as a practitioner or marketers, you're marketing sports events, you're marketing tourism events, festivals. If you know some of the people's those information, attitude, subjective norms, and perceived behavior control, and you know their potential market size, you may be able to figure out, you may have some good guess as to, okay, what's the turnaround? What's the turnout? How many people are actually showing up? Now, here's a bit of application discussion I want you to engage because, well, there's a theory. If we can't actually use it, right, it's useless. Obviously, there's no point. So now in a pair of 2 or 3, you can choose one of the situation, A or B. One is, I'm so sorry to tell you, you are now in another pandemic. Gosh forbid, like God forbid. But the newer task to actually increase daily exercise of the U of A students. Obviously, the same protocol, right? You can get together as a crowd. But if as a burst student who wants to increase the exercises of the URA students during the pandemic, and not a pandemic, what would you do based on a TPP model? So how can we tap into people's attitudes? Two aspects. How can we tap into the people's subjective norms? How can we tap into their perceived behavior control? We could offer different programs. We could provide different messages. Or now we're after the pandemic, and we want you to increase the U-based students' attendance at the Golden Bears and Pandas games. I've been to actually some of the games after the this year, first time actually after the pandemic. I went to volleyball, I went to hockey, I went to a few other things. There are many people coming back. It's great, but it would be nice, don't you think, that the entire arena is packed? Okay, so what do we do? It could be potentially your job. How can we tap into these people's attitude, subjective norm, perceived behavior control to get people in there? Choose one or the other scenario and tell me, based on the theory, what would you do? At least apply one variable, one of the attitude, subjective norms, or PBC, perceived behavior control. If you can check off multiple, that's good. Be specific. Think about the subdimension when you're talking about, okay, so we're going to tap into people's subjective norm. Which subjective norm? How exactly? Okay, you're going to provide a certain messaging. Good. What kind of? Okay. Let's take 3 minutes. Hope is like, what's happening? So quiet. What do we do? What do we do? Okay. Ah.
And I guess
Okay, so we're gonna do the kind of like a sharing the facts about exercise benefits and whatnot. Okay, how? With the UA student, we're talking about the UA students, the audience. What's the best way? Huh? You think so? Me talking about us preaching about the exercise benefit is the best way to change your attitude? Oh my God. It is okay, one way. And then hurrying is like, I mean, we're paying money for it. It's true. But what else? What else? Where do you get the information? Your students, where do you get the information? Huh? Emails, posters, anything else? Okay, student group and whatnot. All right. There's some social media probably too. What do we do? Okay, so that's which type of aspect attitude we're talking about? We're talking about but we're talking about attitude. We're talking about which side was it? Either instrumental or effective. Effective or instrumental. It was a fact about the benefits of exercise, right? Exercise benefits. So therefore, it was fact. Exercise is useful. Instrumental. Yes, good. Okay. So what about the other side? What about the other factors? Keep them going. What do we got?
Use the
subjective norms, my favorite.
We're trying to get students to come to the games, show how much fun everyone's having, and that a lot of people are going to the game.
How?
Social media.
I love it. Right? It's easy. But I mean, that's what we're trying to do. Okay, so now we're gonna talk about more about things like persuasion, conformity in the next chapter 8, right? So to keep your minds open, just to try to connect that, because that's what there it is, right? It's true, but you don't want to also feel like bad about yourself, right? We don't want to make people feel bad about themselves either. So we want to sort of like a quote unquote pressure them in such a way that, oh, okay, I want to be part of that, rather than like, oh, I'm not missing, I'm missing out, just a little bit of a positive way to nudge people. It's difficult, and that's where actually I feel like a lot of marketers can make it sometimes, but that's a good idea. Social media can be a good way to pressure people to an extent. Yes. We got an idea? We got an idea? I could ask this in a final exam. You could be asked about this in your next interview with the, I don't know, CCR or sports team, or, like, okay, Maddie, give me an idea. Give me your elevator pitch. Okay, let's hear. Okay, so let's start sharing. Sorry, Maddie.
Said that if you did like that program, so like first you like tell everybody, like send out an email or something like that about like the benefits of like health and like how it helps not only your physical but mental health. And then we'd make our classes, we'd give like a variety of options, and some may be outdoors once it's warmer, like spread out social distance, because you can do like yoga and like HIIT classes and stuff like that outdoors. And then you would we would have like, you could like on the Zoom format, you would be able to have like a meet and greet beforehand. So it's like people are able to interact with each other like you would in a regular class before the class starts. And then we would leave a bit of time at the end for you to interact with everybody in the end. So then it's like that you can chat about the class, and if like the person who's running it can stay on the call and just kind of hear everybody's feedback and stuff like that. And then also we were thinking of doing like a point system. So it's like however many classes you go to, you earn points. And with those points, you can put them towards like either a free class or like a free U of A t-shirt or something like that.
We're talking about obviously scenario A, and then those kind of classes, and they're online. You can do things outside and whatnot, but also there's online component to get together. I like that idea, because getting together, typically the socialization, social components add a fun to it. People share, oh, like, okay, so this is outdoor, like I went to this place, I did this, I saw this part of the city is actually pretty, I didn't realize, so on and so forth. You share it and you learn, and that actually amplify the fun, and then that could speak to the effective aspect of attitude. And also the facilitator, the instructor can facilitate, okay, the people's awareness of the benefits. Okay, how did you feel? Like, did you feel any differences in your breathing? Like, how's your thinking process? Do you feel like that's more organized, calm? So see, that's the benefits of XYZ kind of thing. So that actually people change their instrumental side of attitude, not all of a sudden, but gradually over time. That's very important. Good thinking. I like that. Anything else? Anybody worked around the subjective norms? That's my favorite, because I love to I shouldn't say manipulate, but social pressure, social support. It's a powerful piece. Curtis?
I didn't have anything for the concept, but
it's okay.
I was thinking like one of the biggest driving factors for like getting active was like going out and doing stuff, but it was hard to go places, like going out somewhere. So I kind of thought like if the U of A organized like either a cycle group or a running group that kind of did a lap to like common areas where people were like living or staying, so like they can kind of meet up on the route, so they can all join up outside running, and they don't feel like it's difficult to get somewhere.
Okay, so that you're alluding to which variable?
Like capability. So like like it's not difficult to go all the way down to the U of A. They're going to come meet you kind of halfway. You can just go out, join them, and then they feel like it's easier to kind of join the activity.
Great. So it's a perceived behavioral control, right? And it's one of the capability that works, even controllability, that it's difficult to get out there to, like, for some people who are living so away from U of A to come to the U of A or something like that. It they may feel difficult, right? But they can use that support of the group as well. So what are we going to do? maybe we can create a app where you can register and you can register, hey, I'm planning on doing this activity. This is happening right now. Do you want to join us? You can just tap. You can ping and just like crowdsourced and everything. Just people like, oh, in my neighborhood, or nearby neighborhood, there's something happening. I'm going to just join them. Yeah. You just drop by, and everything is dynamic, and you can just connect. You feel much easier to come over, especially when the outside is like -40. Well, then you have to stay inside, but still, yeah, sorry. Anything else? That's a great example about PVC. Thanks, Sheree. Anything else? Yes, Natalia.
Under subjective norm and descriptive norm. Thinking for situation B for the Golden Bears kind of games.
Yes.
Could you encourage attendees to like use a hashtag on social media, like post that they're at the game, like hashtag, and so it's showing up in their followers and friends feeds, like, hey, look, I'm at the game, pictures so people see that they're there, and then maybe they're inclined to go.
Did you guys hear it in the back? That's what actually people are doing, and that should be the theory, and well, one of the theory of the marketers. Why would they actually make people to actually hashtag and post their things? Like, did you realize that the sports events and whatnot, people actually these days, event organizers, they actually encourage people to post their pictures, hashtag what, so on and so forth. Because then other people would be like, oh, that's the right there, for example, descriptive norm, right? Yeah. That what they see actually, ooh, other people are actually doing this, enjoying this. Others game, I'm not. Well, I wanna, right? And it started to look things up, and there's an opportunity, you talk to, I don't know, your partners or whatever, like, hey, friends, like, do you want to go there next time? And it happens actually. Mm-hmm. Or sometimes we write out like we do advertisement and whatnot on a traditional medias and YouTube, and we just actually tell people to come, which is more about injunctive no, right? We actually tell people. It doesn't have to be just actually people. It could be advertisement, tell you what to do or what not to do. That's injunctive no. Make sense? We had a similar idea right there too, right? We have people to post it. We can do that here, Golden Bears. I don't know we're doing it. I know actually it's Siri's today, not missing it at had to miss a class, but she's working for the Golden Bears, some of the halftime things, and they're having actually these ideas is very important, and it helps to an extent if you do it well. So hopefully you have some ideas around this: attitude, subjective norm, and perceived behavior control. And also perceived behavior control. Note that it's about how good they think they are. People think they are. It's the perceived. So it's not that we have to actually train them and work with them so that they have to actually get better, right? Which is the one thing. But also we can work around their perception that, you know what, you actually have more skills than you think. A lot of people are afraid of using, for example, gym, because they don't know, they don't think that they know anything about it. But they may know actually something, or they can actually easily learn. If you can work around that actually perception, you can then facilitate people's use. Any questions about chapter 7? Recording. Yes, Teresa.
If we're just chatting about like
yeah.
Like maybe more capability or like resources, like free transit. Free students, like
wait, we don't have a free transit?
Well,
we don't.
Games?
2 games. Okay. Well, games are okay, that's a good question. Is like buses and trains, are they free to students now? I mean, you're paying it as a part of the fees. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
ARC card. Right. Okay.
You have no option.
You have no option to drop out of the transit.
No? So you better just take it. Ooh, so that's part of like environmental stuff, quote unquote.
Accessibility.
Yeah.
Larger numbers.
Okay. Anyway, cool. Thank you. Side notes. We can talk about that. But yes, Like, for example, making it easy so that not just that there's a transit, but also there's increased transit, for example, from campus, right? Let's say some of the volleyball game, basketball game. Where do they happen? Where do they happen? Stable Center, South Campus. So we're going to shadow people, students from here, assuming they're most of them are here, with the bus, right? A lot of buses or LRT, whatever. We increase the number. We make it maybe student priority buses sometimes, maybe, so that they can go. It's normal games are free, should be. They're except the conference games should be free with the 1 credit. We could make everything free. That would be more accessible. The controllability will increase, arguably, right? It's difficult to actually, well, watching the game part is difficult. What kind of skills involved? I guess there's some knowledge around the certain games, certain sports, right? So that's something you can work around in terms of capability. Was that a hand? No? Good? All right. So that actually connect, and especially the social norm aspect of the TBB nicely leads to the next chapter, which is chapter 8, social influence. And these are the 5 things that actually 8 things that the chapter talked about. I'm actually not going to focus on these 2 right here, these 2 right here, because leisure education, I kind of touched on it in this course as well as RLS 100. If you want to hear me talk about it, you can talk about me talking about it tonight at 6, okay, yapping about it for 1 hour and a half, 90 minutes if you want to. There's a Ms. Carrie Met from AHS, recreational therapist, coming in, and some of the hard talk may actually tap into that, so I decided not to. This is very common in a therapeutic recreation. If you want me to talk, I will give you more talk. The last piece, leisure in a later life. Dr. Haidong Liang is the expert in this. Like, he's literally a gerontologist. He has like years, decades of actual experience working with and serving older adults here in Edmonton as well. So I'm going to let him talk about it. So therefore, the rest of it I'm going to talk about. And the first part of the chapter, we're talking about 5 basic social processes. And I hope you enjoy the chapter. If you read the chapter, this is an interesting chapter, by the way. They're very interesting studies. Very quite different kind of studies, because we're not looking at personal factor anymore. We're looking at the social and environmental factors. We talk about things like coercion, conformity, how we make people, feel that they have to pressure, that they have to do something. You don't think that happens in a leisure? You know what? Guess what? It does. And sometimes it's powerful. So this equation, so now we have leisure. So leisure behavior or behavior is a function of personal and environmental or situational factor, social factor. We're talking about the last piece of equation in this chapter. The first process being imitation and modeling. We learn by modeling. And the chapter, based on the research, shows that our role models tend to be these. Our role models tends to be these people. I want you to think about your role model. Maybe your parent, maybe your uncles and auntie or siblings, maybe your friend, like people who lived in your neighborhood, coach, other mentors. Think about them. Do they fit into these categories? Are they older than you? Are they familiar to you? Do you perceive them to attractive as in nice looking or handsome or whatever? Do you perceive them to be competent in whatever the area they're in? Sports, for example, leadership. Research shows that these people tends to be our role models. Yes, Luke.
Is that attractive? Standpoint, or is that you're attracted to them with that
Romantic way? No, physical appearance. Yes, mostly. I think the most of studies that cited here were about physical appearance. And I don't know. So typically what they do is that basically sometimes they show the different pictures and then let them choose based on the credibility or, you know, trustworthiness and whatnot. And then they actually manipulate people's look, quote unquote, look, quote unquote, objectively. Obviously, it's not perfectly objective, but there are some standards around who, you know, which picture look more objective and so on and so forth, right? And then they manipulate that. So that's the kind of research that they're citing. That's what the psychologists, social psychologists do. I don't know how they are sort of like drawn toward the person, but I'm not sure about the in terms of modeling, but in terms of imitation now, modeling and imitation has a little bit of different, you know, connotation. Like, for example, look, that's an interesting point because, well, I'm obviously attracted to my wife. It's a good thing, right? I guess. And in Chinese, okay, so there's a Chinese phrase apparently in China. It's and then my Mandarin sucks, so bear me. It's called "hu qi shan" or something like that. So the couple started to have the same face. But it's not a literal, actually literal physical face. Although, yeah, people look at us and I'm like, yeah, you guys have a similar face. No, it's an Asian face. You know, and then it's the atmosphere, right? And then we started to like similar things too. For example, she loves vegetable. I love the meat. And typical dude stuff. But then I started to cook more vegetables since I married her. And started to cook more, and then I started to actually, some of the meat started to smell to me. I'm like, gosh, this is scary. I started to like, my taste bud even started to behave similarly to my wife. I started to like the same TV drama as my wife, so on and so forth. So maybe that drawnness, you know, have a thing around that. Now, the tricky part is it's difficult to study. That bonding, the intimate, personalized bonding is very difficult to study. Because we can get couples, but we cannot control. We cannot randomly make you fall into love with something else. It's very difficult and unethical probably to do that. So it's probably there's a difficulty in that, studying that. But I can see, especially in terms of imitation, couples started to behave similarly to an extent. I will show you evidence. Textbook has evidence around that. Now, role models or even imitation is not always a good thing if you think about it. Modeling happen negatively as well. What were the quote unquote the habits that you picked up from your family, your parents? Do you have it? I have it. Right? For example, so those kind of colleagues, they studied youth in Chicago area, some of the most dangerous neighborhoods in Chicago, and actually former gang members. When they interviewed, I think I talked about that in RLS 100. One of the reasons why they mentioned in terms of why they got into the gang food was because all the brothers and sisters who took care of them were actually gang members. It was that simple. And that modeling got into basically their own gang membership as well. Now, modeling, imitating, it's both about what people say to you and what people do around you. Right? Look at these two things. Your parent tells you, let's say, benefits of exercise. Well, good parent, right? And also problems around screen time. Hey, you don't want to, you know, hope you don't want to spend so much time on a screen, you know, just go out and play, you know, so on and so forth. Great parents. But then maybe the same parents may turn around, and as children, we observe, right? Children are looking at us. That we are, for example, spending a lot of time working, although it's part of the adulting. Yes, we got to do it. We got to just earn the bucks money, spend a lot of time on the computer, and then watch TV because we're tired. And then no exercise. Guilty. Right? And then what people tell is this, what people do is this. And in this situation, actually, you get the conflicting messages from your parent. Like, are you like, why are you not doing it? If you think this is really important. Obviously, people sometimes don't see the reasons, all the situations. So does this remind you anything that we just talked about? One of the things in a TPB? Injunctive and descriptive subjective norms. Marvin said subjective norm too. Thank you. Yes. Injunctive and descriptive. That's the injunctive side, what people tell you to do or not to do. And this is descriptive, what people do around you. Both are important. And now chapter talk about this issue, lack of role models. We sometimes have role model, both positively or negatively, but also we lack, and that's the problem too sometimes. And we want to cite some situations professionally as well. For example, in our field, let's say a person with a disability wants to be a therapist. And don't you think that's a great idea? Because they lived with a certain impairment. They probably have rich experiences and insight. But then they may not have the role model, right? Other existing therapists with a disability. They may struggle. Indigenous professional in, let's say, park industry, they may not find many role models coming from their background, especially in some, for example, urban areas and so on and so forth. In those situations, media and social media could play certain type of role model, celebrities, and those. How many of you kind of like listen to Taylor Swift? Kind of like, resonating with it, right? She was kind of like a role model to an extent. Beyonce was kind of a role model to an extent. People, it was a top, maybe athlete. Okay, so let's be a dude. Maybe it was the athletes, right? They were the role model to you. It happens. But obviously, they cannot provide that personal aspect of familiarity because they're, they exist in that screens and whatnot, Hollywood. And the second process of one of the big fives in terms of the socialization is this one, persuasion, that we get persuaded to do or not to do a lot during leisure time, right? This happened recently to me. So this is a game. Sorry, it's called Final Fantasy 16. It's coming out very soon with the PS5. It's an action RPG. It's gonna be awesome. The other day I was playing, not these days, last week I was talking to my friends playing game and they were telling me about this because it was rolling out 2 weeks ago, I guess. My friends were telling, hey, Shin, you gotta check it out. It's really cool. There's a trailer, right? That trailer, it's like a movie, but a game. And the graphics are amazing and whatnot. So we watched the trailer together. They convinced me that, yeah, I gotta ditch my PS4. I have to buy PS5 so that I can play this too. Now my job is to persuade my partner, my wife, to actually so that I can buy this. So that's another persuasion I have to do. But this happened. What's the ad recently you watched? And you're like, oh, you gotta have it. Well, I have to go there. Maybe it's a trip. Maybe it's a stuff. Maybe you watch, I don't know, you were watching March Madness basketball and you're like, yeah, I want to get there and watch this. And there are a couple, the textbook talk about based on research, that there are 3 major groups of factors that impact how persuasive certain message can be. The first group of factor, and trust me, this happens, the characteristic of the persuader. It doesn't matter what people tell you. It's what they are. And what they are by the persuader, it doesn't necessarily mean a person. It could be a thing like advertisement, right? Source of information. So again, attractiveness is very important. Looks, appearance, and also perceived credibility. So when I say something, I don't know how credible you perceive to me, you might more likely to do stuff just because. The second group of factor are about characteristics of the message, what kind of things you're told. And now 2 things we have to think about is this. The first is the emotion versus logic. Now, probably logic side makes sense to you. And it's not necessarily versus actually, probably emotion and logic, but logic side probably makes sense. Something has to be, because it's a persuasion, right? Something has to make sense. Something has to be logical. And something has to be, quote unquote, supported by data or evidence. Then yeah, it's more persuasive. But emotion is very important. More and more research shows what is called emotive side of persuasion. When you're moved, you watch a theater about, like, for example, some sort of social issue, right? You're moved. You're more likely to actually get out and do stuff to work on that issue, social issue. You watch some documentary that was very, very emotional, and you got really emotional about the, climate change. But before that, you listen to the climate change lecture for 5 times, 10 times. That didn't change anything, but that documentary about the penguin made you emotional. And now you started to do something. It happens, right? Penguins are adorable. And also the direct and indirect appeals and suggestions. Direct is like they tell you, like, hey, do this, buy this, don't do this, so on and so forth. And sometimes indirect, right? Like, for example, there's a poster of people enjoying badminton, let's say. They don't tell you that you should play badminton, but the message is quite clear that, yeah, probably you should. Then you can have this kind of fun, right? Sometimes we don't necessarily direct appeal is not always the best way. Because when, those political ads, this is the election seasons, and they tell you, like, don't vote this, all that things. And you go like, you know what? I'm going to just go ahead and do the opposite of what you told me to do. Because I don't know, I don't like to be told. And then third, how we perceive, the recipient receives the message. And this is where some of the things that I mentioned is very important. And it really circles back to the earlier chapter. I'm kind of like flagging those concepts. So these concepts can be tested in the final exam. I will clarify that. I will specify them in the final exam study guide. But if our message make people feel like your choice is now limited, psychological reactance can happen. What do we mean by psychological reactance? Do you remember anything? Thank you. Thank you for remembering the image, right? There was a big image of baby with the toy. If you take the toy out, take it out from the baby, they're going to cry and they're going to get that toy back so bad, right? If you take out any option from us, we have this innate fundamental need to get that back. That choice becomes more important. You don't want to do that during the process of persuasion. Also, overt persuasion with the extrinsic reward. Okay, if you do this, I'm going to give you this, right? This little rewards. Or punishment. If you don't do this, I'm going to give you that, something that you don't like. Can lead to over justification. You remember over justification? I hope you do. Over justification. What was over justification? Yeah. It's when we swell intrinsic motivation by introducing extrinsic motivation, like rewards or punishment. People are enjoying something for its own sake, and now you say, oh, if you do this again, I'll give you a candy. And now I don't want to do this thing without getting candy anymore. Now your motivation is extrinsic motivation. The key is we want to work around autonomy support. We want to help people to satisfy autonomy, competence, and relatedness, interpersonal relatedness in your thing, whatever you're offering, whether it's a sports event, park services, whatever, so that actually they can feel intrinsically motivated, intrinsically persuaded in their process. Now, how do we do this without eliminating choice and without introducing extrinsic motivation? Shin, how is it possible? I'll show you example. And this is the end of the class today. But this is a very interesting video, and I hope you like it. You might have actually watched this video because it's millions of times viewed. So there is a group of engineers, students, and urban planners wanted to increase people's use of stairs because that's good for our exercise, right? But we can't tell them to do, or we cannot eliminate escalator. So they had an idea. See what they did? Do you see earlier how many people are taking escalator? How many people are taking stairs? I mean, can you believe though, rush hours is gonna be so much noisy, like there's just all kinds of sounds at the same time. But you get the idea. Ah. So the project is called a fun theory. So that actually by fun, the intrinsic motivation, we can persuade people much more strongly. And even people realizing that they're persuaded, right? Those people didn't realize, and it's called a nudge, and we're going to talk about the nudge concept and theory a little bit. They were not forbidden. Their choice of using escalator was not eliminated. It was still there. But so many people chose the stairs, and that's good for health. Can we do the same thing with the other important stuff in our life, in your field? Maybe we can.